Hi, this is Will Stewart from OnlineChessLessons.net, and today I'm going to be covering a game from the semifinals between Super-GM Gata Kamsky and GM-elect Sam Shankland. And so Kamsky really, showed his class here as a solid 2,700 FIDE player. This is really what separates the big guys, in that just small positional lasting advantages, and they know how to turn the screws and crank it into a win. And so Shankland, I was disappointed by his play in the semifinals, and that he seemed a little intimidated by his opponent, by Kamsky. You know, I think in their first game he had a good chance to play for a win. Kamsky played a piece sacrifice that I was not so impressed by, and Shankland seemed a little too happy to draw in a superior position. So that being said, this was the decisive game of this semifinals match that pushed Kamsky into the finals, which he went on to win against Yuri Shulman. So this is going into a Najdorf after knight f6 and a6. So this can go into a Shvinigan with e6, but typically people are going into a Najdorf these days. And now Kamsky plays h3, which is a somewhat offbeat variation. It's been seen. I played it a few times myself. I personally like it. It doesn't require so much exact book theory knowledge, you could say, and it just relies on the fact that White's going to get a solid position. And here Shankland plays e5. The other alternative is to play e6. But I like e5. It makes sense to me. You got to stick to your principles. The drawback is that the d5 square is going to be weak. So with knight to e2, knight b3 has been played, but I like knight e2 more. And so now g4, and that's the idea of the h3 line, because it's similar to playing. Let's go back here. It's similar to playing g3. However, in most of the variations with g3, White is going to play h3, and then he's going to play g4 anyway. So the idea with the h3 line is that White just goes ahead and he plays g4 in one move. So with bishop e6, this seems to me to be it's almost like Black almost equalizes in these lines, but it just seems that White maintains a slight pull. So with d5, it looks like Black is going to equalize. But after pawn takes, I had an interesting game against an IM a couple months ago where I played g5. And I think it went something like this. And I think I went on to win, but it wasn't because of the opening choice. I recouped the pawn. It was okay. Lasting positional pressure along the diagonal there. But anyway, so d5 seems to be the best try for Black. It makes the most sense, at least. I think h6 is also a move. And Black can even play like bishop e7 here, queen c7. I mean, there's a lot of ideas. But d5 makes the most sense. I mean, go ahead. If White wants to take his time with h3 and g4, well, Black should take his time to go ahead and play in the center, which he does. And after pawn takes, knight takes, and now bishop g2. And so this is kind of a lingering theme in the opening, is that White is just going to have pressure along that diagonal. And so bishop b4, so I would have considered bishop d2 here, but Kamsky just goes in and castles. So the pawn is, yes, okay, he's allowing his pawns to be doubled on c3 here, but in exchange, Black is giving up this dark squared bishop. So White's going to have the two bishops. So this is knight takes c3. That makes sense. I mean, also to consider was b takes c3. But maybe, I don't know, b5 seems a little too crazy, opening up the diagonal too much. But anyway, so Kamsky knight takes c3 makes sense, and knight takes and pawn takes. So we are 13 moves into the game. Kamsky's used about 12, 15 minutes, something like that. Shankland's barely used any time at all. So what's going on? Well, White does have these doubled pawns, and they're certainly quite weak. But he's also got a very nicely placed bishop, and he's also got the advantage of the two bishops. So with bishop a3, now he's, it's going to be tough for Black to castle. So he goes ahead and takes White's queen. And so this is what separates 2,700 GMs these days, because they get these small advantages out of the opening, and they just turn the screws and they just convert it into wins. In a position like this, you got to be thinking, okay, what has white really achieved out of the opening? Well, he's got slightly better development in that he's castled, and white by black taking his queen in the last move, he developed this rook essentially for free. The bishop is definitely exerting a lot of pressure, and this bishop, so white's bishops are really raking the board. So after rook d8, bishop d6, a nice move. White doesn't want to trade too much. So now the material balance, after the queen trade, white doesn't really want to trade rooks, because with both rooks on the board, he's going to be able to achieve more pressure. Pressure on the e5 pawn and definitely pressure on the b7 pawn. So for black, he's got to generate some counterplay, and the obvious way to do it is going to be to take the pawn on c3. So that's kind of what seems to be going on to me in the position here. So rook b1, and definitely makes sense when I go ahead and start creating weaknesses. And black is a slightly uncomfortable position now, because this bishop is tying him down, this bishop's tying him down, and the white rooks are ideally placed, essentially. So, and also he's got a problem getting his king out and getting this rook on h8. So this, these tiny subtle differences, that this is what makes the difference. So rook d3. A nice idea, maybe doubling the rooks. And this I like how Kamsky uses the bishop to block the d file until he can take control of it. So after king f7, now bishop c7, and essentially Kamsky was trying to force black to undouble his pawns and take the rook. This is getting definitely very uncomfortable for black, and if he doesn't trade, rook d7 is obviously impossible because the b7 pawn is going to drop after it takes. So that's not an option. Well, if black doesn't want to trade rooks, which he doesn't want to undouble white's pawns. I mean, that's his only trump. Rook e8, not a move you really want to play, and that's seems like it's going to lose a pawn anyways. If white wants to go into an opposite colored bishop endgame, but this is going to be very draw. It's going to be tough to win. So rook e8, check, and again, black can't move the bishop because the b7 pawn will fall. So in this position, I mean, okay, now this is getting very dangerous for black. This is going to be very tough to hold. Moves like f4, possibly h4 coming to track the black king down. It's very tough. So with that in mind, Shankland takes on d3. And now after rook e8, this is just getting tougher because white has the two bishops and black has no counterplay whatsoever. Also, white has managed to undouble his pawns. Definitely a big achievement. So with bishop b6, white is preparing to play d4. He's also really locked that pawn down on b7. And with bishop e6, okay, well he's attacking one weakness. I mean, black needs to attack, and simply bishop c5. So the bishop's on a great diagonal. It's restricting black's pieces. He can't play rook e7, which would be nice, and it opens up an attack on b7. So with b5, now Kamsky, he doesn't want to defend the pawn. He wants to continue attacking, continue momentum. So he plays a4. And I don't know. I mean, little tactical idea by Shankland here. Rook c8, and white is going to give the piece back. So he doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to trade pieces anymore. He needs to keep one rook on because it's going to put pressure on black's position. With the two bishops, it's going to give white good winning chances. So I'd say in this endgame, white's probably going to win this, I don't know, 8 or 9 times out of 10 if he's a solid positional GM. And so now the idea, I guess, with a4 and maybe Shankland, starting to realize he's in some trouble. If he takes, it looks like it's okay, but now after bishop takes, c6, rook c8, all of a sudden it doesn't work. Does not win a piece. Yeah, it actually loses the piece for black. So that's not going to work. So a4 is a good move. And rook b8, and so now pawn takes. And obviously, rook b8. So yes, the rook is still hanging, but I mean the knight on c6. But again, it doesn't quite work. So these tactics, black is just barely holding on here. With rook c8 again, I mean he's maybe he's gonna drop a pawn here. It looks like, and this is very favorable for white. Very favorable. So Kamsky, it's not a good sign when your opponent doesn't win a pawn. Kamsky takes his time, very patient, the mark of a very good player. And Kamsky is, he makes a living grinding positional wins like this. Rook a1. So he doesn't he doesn't cop out for the immediate win of a pawn. Instead, preserving the two bishops, they're raking the board. They're just controlling an incredible amount of squares all over, and he's going to come back and win that b5 pawn. It's just too weak. So he chooses now bishop d5 check, and Kamsky was threatening to win. He was threatening to take the piece. Let's say black does something inconsequential move, and bishop takes, and again, white's going to hold on to the extra piece. So bishop d7. It's getting tough to offer black any good advice here. And after check, now the bishops are really taking over the board. And Kamsky just probing for weaknesses with bishop e4. And so now king f7 to, if takes, white is going to drop a piece. So f3 by Kamsky. Just very, very patient play. And it's very tough to play black here because what can you do? Any move is going to create a weakness. Moves such as b4, Kamsky was probably, I would assume he was intending c4 in response and just round up this pawn anyway. So with f3, it seems kind of weird, but it makes sense. I mean, Kamsky wants to play d4, and he wants to have the bishop secure on e4. Maybe he wants to march his king up as well. So the patience, this is what separates the good players. The good players from the great, really. I mean, this is what separates the great players like Kamsky. I mean, just the positional patience. And just looking ahead, the position's not going to change that much, so don't be too hasty. And so now he finally plays d4, and the two bishops still killing the board. Now they got a pass pawn to help too. Pawn on b5, extremely weak for black. f5, I wasn't crazy about this move because it just creates a weakness for black. But again, it's very tough to play these kinds of positions without any counterplay. So now bishop d3, and so black has two weaknesses. And the pawn on h7 is not too strong either. So bishop e6, at least he's... Now here he's sacked a pawn. I don't know. Maybe he could have tried. I don't know if he can hold it at all. Because it just seems like white is going to round it up. I mean, I don't know. This was an idea, but d5 and rook a7 to come, for example. Maybe knight e7, rook a7. It just seems like black's going to drop a piece. It's just going to be too tough, these variations. So I think that's why he just let the pawn go instead of losing a piece. And now it's over. I mean, if he's still got the two bishops, all of the advantages of his position, and now he's got a pass pawn to boot. So I think it's just impossible to hold it here, as well as a weakness on f5. Rook a6, starting to crank the screws, applying the pressure. And after king g6 and Shankland trying to get active with his king. He's got about 10 minutes here. Kamsky is about 40, so not a good sign. And h5. So black he's trying to hold the blockade, doing what he can. And here I don't know. I guess Shankland just gave up. I guess he kind of gave up. And with king takes, and now bishop takes c6, a pretty cool mate. With bishop takes c6. Simply rook takes, and bishop e7. It's a pretty nice mate. It's not bad. So that was the idea. So after bishop takes c6, Shankland resigned. He was out of time, and just a fantastic positional victory by Gata Kamsky, propelling him into the finals versus Yuri Shulman. So Shankland had a good result. He ended up beating Robert Hess for the third place in the consolation match. So definitely an interesting U.S. championship this year. So nice win by Kamsky. This is William Stewart from OnlineChessLessons.net, and thanks for listening.